I'm Gregory James, and I'm the director, principal investigator of the Cross Timbers Apex Accelerator at the University of Texas at Arlington. I'm very happy to introduce the speakers for today's webinar. I think it will be very insightful to each of you. And of course, I want to thank ELB Learning and Wright Resource Group for giving me the opportunity to moderate this panel. Today, we want to talk about the landscape of learning and development within the public sector. And so we hope that our three major topics will be of interest. Topic number one will be cybersecurity. Topic number two is artificial intelligence. And then, of course, 4 is leadership development. We're very happy to have some key experts in this area to help you understand what the trends are. And we have Cy Uda, Paul Ramsey, and Josh Penzel as part of our panel. I'm going to ask each of you to talk a little bit about introducing yourself, and then we'll go right into the webinar itself. So, Paul, would you like to start?
Hi, everyone. Paul Ramsey. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you say Paula?
I think you can go ahead, Paul.
Okay, I'll go ahead. Paul Ramsey here.
Paul, yes.
And yes, I have about 30 years of experience, mainly in human resources. My main focus has always been in learning and development. Been chief learning officer for multiple organizations, both in the public and the private sector, and focus a lot on leadership development, creating those from scratch and really looking at ways to tie that into what the organization is needing. So we'll talk about that more today. I'm based in Dallas, Texas.
Very good. Thank you. Cy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Gregory. Honored to be with everyone here today. I'm Cy Huda, founder and CEO of CyberCatch. We're an AI-enabled cybersecurity compliance solution provider. What's unique about us is we're attacking the root cause of why these attacks continue to happen, which is poor defense and controls that are either not working or are missing, and the organization isn't aware of them. So they're security holes, but the attackers find them before the organization becomes aware, and it's too late. So what we do is we prevent that from happening with our AI-enabled solution. So it's continuous cybersecurity compliance and cyber risk mitigation. And I'm the author of a book called Next Level Cybersecurity. It's an Amazon bestseller. And the inspiration for that, for me, for the book, but also this company, was a personal, infringement on me, where my security clearance information, along with a copy of my fingerprints, were breached, and that was just very, very shocking to me and upsetting, because fingerprints is so personal to each of us. There's nothing more unique than that in each of us. And so I wrote the book, researching why these hacks happen, and uncovered a pattern and the reasons, and that led to the book, but also CyberCatch. We serve the vulnerable, which is all of those high-value target segments in our society today. Yep. Defense, manufacturing, education, government, public. So glad to be here and really honored to be with everyone here, distinguished panel, and of course, partnering with ELB. And we'll talk more about our partnership here, which is pretty exciting. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Josh?
Thanks, Gregory. I'm Josh Penzel. I currently am the head of the AI Custom Solutions area of ELB Learning. Also, previously worked companies like Amazon launching the Alexa product, which if I said that and your room just started making noise, I apologize. Worked in autonomous vehicles as well. Those are vehicles that drive themselves, another scary and interesting thing. And now, of course, although AI has been around for a long time, right? The big new issue is generative AI and large language models, and super excited to talk about how those not only affect learning and development as a whole, but specifically the public sector. So
Very
excited to
good.
be on this panel. Thanks a lot, Gregory.
Yes, thank you very much. So, Cy, why don't we start with you? Can you talk a little bit about what government agencies are doing to comply with cybersecurity requirements, and in particular at the procurement side of what government employees do?
Sure, Gregory. Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, cyber risk is top of mind for everyone, as it should be, because every organization, whether you're in the public sector or private, is digital. Everyone uses email. Everyone accesses web applications. Everyone has a website. So because of that, the attackers can easily get in, and so that's why cyber risk is magnified even more so in today's world. So the President of the United States issued an executive order essentially directing federal agencies to implement NIST cybersecurity framework. That's been around a while, and it requires essentially 108 cybersecurity controls. So that's becoming a mandate for federal agencies to get in compliance, but also start to drive it down in acquisitions. But the defense sector has taken even more so of a lead. And so the DoD, Department of Defense, has essentially put together NIST 80171, which requires implementation of 110 cybersecurity controls.
Right.
And these apply to defense companies. There's about 300,000 of them in the United States today. And they're all essentially mostly small to mid-size. Some of them are a little bit large, like the big guys like Boeing and Northrop Grumman. But most of them are small to mid-size. And so they have to, if they handle what's called control unclassified information, have to comply with NIST 8171 and implement 110 controls. Some of them are lower risk and handle what's called federal contract information.
Mm-hmm.
They're required to comply with federal acquisition regulation, and that requires implementation of 17 cybersecurity controls because they're a little bit lower risk. But as they move up and start to get access to CUI, then they've got to step it up and comply and implement 110 controls. So those are some of the leading ways that the government is trying to move everybody forward. Defense, of course, is really key because they're a high-value target. We've got the big four after us: Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. There's criminal gangs. So really everyone in the public sector, really should, in my judgment, frankly, comply with NIST 80171. We help many companies in the defense sector, and if it's done right, it really provides a solid defense, those 110 controls. It's a little bit deeper and more specific than NIST cybersecurity framework. NIST cybersecurity framework is a little bit more general with the 108. The 110 are really solid. And
Right.
so that's what we urge everyone to take a close look at in the government sector, certainly private sector, but also public sector. And just change the word CUI with data. That's all you got to do. But other than that, that should provide a solid defense. So that's what's happening. In other countries, Canada, I'll just quickly wrap up here. I had the honor and privilege of helping author Canada's National Cybersecurity Standard. It's the first of its kind for supply chain. So the Canadian government asked me to lead that effort. We formulated a team, and we ended up putting in 55 controls. We used NIST 80171, the 110 as a base, and essentially came up with about half of it, 55 controls. And these are for the supply chain, there's about 1.2 million in Canada. There are small to mid-sized businesses that supply mostly to the Canadian government. But that's a good start in looking at the other part of this, which is the supply chain, because frequently that's the entry point for attackers into pivoting to the other organizations. So there's some other movement going on around the world, but I think U.S. still in the lead, and we just got to follow NIST 80171.
Very good. I know we're actively involved here in CMMC implementation as soon as it becomes part of the federal acquisition regulations. But one of the things we're seeing is that small business in their effort to comply is going to be fairly expensive. And so
it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. That's where CyberCatch, comes in. So our AI-enabled solution enables compliance 6 times quicker than anything out there and 10 times less expensive. Because it's like TurboTax, so for small to mid-size, you can ask the, AI advisor any question. There's templates. And so we made it really easy. So there's creative ways to get into compliance and security.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. Paul, what what changes do you see with managers in the hybrid, since we're moving more on hybrid teams? What impact do you see learning having in this particular trend?
Well, one thing I'd say is definitely playing off of what Cy just said is being very cognizant as people are working. Some people are working either full or part-time in a remote setting, making sure that they're following the organization's cybersecurity policies and all the protections there. It's really important that leaders are very intentional about what they do. And one area is to look at their own biases. So most of the C-suite that I've reported to in my history have been very much against any type of remote work because they want people right there. That's how they're used to working. However, there is a war for talent right now, and it's been that way, especially during the COVID years and after that. And so a lot of companies, because of the pandemic, had to flex and have people working from home for their own safety. And some are starting to bring them back. Some are allowing a flex schedule, or they're staying 100% remote. The organization that I most recently worked with, all support roles in the large health system there were moved into a remote setting. So it's important to be intentional about connecting with your teams, listening to them, not just spouting off what we usually do as leaders, but listening to them. And that will help to identify what their engagement level is, what things they're struggling with. Some people love being at home and others did not, and of all age groups. And so it's important to really connect with those people. You can do that through, first of all, clarifying your expectations of what work is going to be done and how it's going to be done. If there's specific times that they're working, or it's a more flex schedule, you can work in the evening if you want, as long as your job's done, we don't care. But it's important to listen to your team and the concerns they have, and then also listen to what the organization needs and helping to bridge those two together there. It's very important to continue having or start having one-on-ones. And you could do that with a video setting or team meetings. I would hold weekly team meetings, and they don't have to be long, but again, they need to be intentional into what message do I want to give out that keeps them informed, and what am I going to do to gather information from them so that they feel like I'm really listening to them and I'm able to help connect with them in the thing. So I ask, are there communication gaps? Do you have any concerns about the big announcement that we just had last week or something like that? And how are we able to connect with you? So if you have leaders reporting to you, so we have leaders reporting to leaders, it's important to develop those leaders in how to kind of set some of their own work preference biases aside and reach out to their teams in some creative ways, checking on their work-life balance, checking on their mental health in appropriate ways that you can do, but really listening to them. And even doing skip level meetings where I would have my leadership team is not on the call, but I'm talking to their direct reports. And I clarify, this is not a gotcha for your leader. What are your leaders doing badly? I just want to give them a free opportunity to, in a safe way, to just share how they're feeling on the front line. And it helps me connect more with them.
Good. I know that there has to be some new leadership techniques that they're having to deploy now, as opposed to, say, when everybody was in the office. And you did allude a little bit to those techniques. Can you elaborate a little bit more about what they should be doing from a leadership learning point of view?
Definitely. So communication, as I mentioned, is a big one. And a lot of leaders, we think they have emotional intelligence, but they don't necessarily have emotional intelligence at the level that we might be needing, especially when you're not face-to-face with people. So it's your own self-awareness. It's looking at how you can build those relationships in a different way. So how are you, if you are an introverted leader, how are you going to do that? And actually, we found that the introverted leaders liked working through a remote setting because they were
Mhm.
able to enter things in chat, they were able to take better notes, they were able to connect with people more one-on-one than in a very large group where they're physically seeing everyone around them. But if you're an extroverted person, then you have to be able to flex that style as well. So it's really flexing to the style of the people that you're talking to. So your team, so either the individual or your team. And that takes a huge effort for a lot of leaders because we're used to, this is who I am. I'm Paul. This is how I lead. It's how I've always led. But when you have people in a remote setting or a hybrid setting and not just face to face, or you have a meeting where some are in person and some are in a Zoom call like this, how are you going to engage everyone in there? So it's the aspect of engagement, of understanding the culture of your organization and the communication and being able to flex your style.
Very good. I know that as a leader myself, when we're in a meeting, I can say something and I can tell what they're thinking. You know, so what kind of recommendations do you have in that area? Because it's easy when everybody's just got a picture of themselves and you say, "Oh, here's a new procedure," and it goes silent. So what kind of things are you seeing in that area?
That goes back to something I stated early on around listening. So we have multiple avenues for how people can give input. Obviously, you can just email me, although the quiet person's probably not going to do that. We also send out work anniversary surveys, and they're very targeted on specific things. So when it's your work anniversary, then you get an email and a short list of questions that ask on certain things related to the culture, the direction of the organization, the communication. How is that going? How are you feeling about your own personal development? Do you understand the strategy of the organization? That gives us a pulse on the organization throughout the entire year. Most organizations will do a once-a-year survey. And if it's done right after raises are done, then everyone's happy, maybe. And if it's done when they're announced we're not doing raises because resources are tight, well, then your results are going to be bad. So we do it throughout the year, but you can do little pulse surveys. I worked in one large organization where they would randomly select people. And when you were trying to log in the morning, before you could actually log in, it threw up a quick question that you had to answer. And just one question, and then they would gather that information, and that allowed them to ask questions on the hot topics of that day.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Okay, Josh, you're kind of
a lot there.
You're kind of the elephant in the room when it comes to AI and its impact on leadership development, as well as the rest of business operations.
Yeah. So, I look like an elephant right now. The light, I need to get my lighting figured out, I think. Well, though if I turn like this, you don't see a trunk. So that's good. And wow, I'm glad thanks for saving me till I go after Cy and Paul. That's quite I have to follow all that gold they just dropped on the ground.
Very good. No, I'm sure you have some more gold to add. What are the risks in using? Is it generative AI?
Yep, generative AI.
You may want to give us a little explanation of what that is.
Yeah, really quickly. So what is generative AI? Before I even get there, I want to point out something Paul just talked about, which was this daily survey. I used to work at Amazon, and one of the first projects I launched there was a daily survey. Everyone, not just the folks in their office, but folks on the floor at the warehouse, every single day have to answer a question that can tell you how they're doing. But an interesting thing came up when we were rolling that out. Is asking the question itself changing the behavior, which led to a follow-up question, which was, does it matter? Right? And so I just ask you to think about that by not just is asking the question to get the data useful, but does asking the question affect how the person is reacting? And what's interesting in how this overlaps perhaps to this generative AI concept is it used to be AI's been around for a while. I mean, we can go back to the idea of AI with the Mechanical Turk, the fake the fake robot that used to play chess. And I worked at Alexa. Many of us have smartphones that you can talk to. There have been chatbots and all sorts of stuff for a while. What suddenly changed in January-ish was this release of ChatGPT. And what it opened up to the public was the ability to engage with something called large language models. And this is AI that essentially is learning and can learn and has a memory, and you can talk to it like I am talking to you right now. And as a result of that, it's able to converse with normal people. You don't have to know how to program. I sometimes have a friend who says the new programming language is your language. If you know English, you can go right now to ChatGPT or Claude or Bard or any of the new systems that are out there, and you can create any program you want. And so what's interesting with this is how it has now opened up accessibility to everyone. How something that was in the hands of perhaps a few is now in the hands of everyone. One great way I like to liken it to, the New York Times actually said this months ago, and by the way, months ago in AI time is years ago, right? It's like dog years, is this was like when browsers came out. The internet existed since the 70s, but suddenly a browser came out and you could search the internet or you could go to web pages, and it made it accessible. And that's what changed, and why Amazon came around, and Borders isn't here, right? And why you saw Blockbuster replaced by Netflix and all of these things. But what's most interesting, I think, about ChatGPT is it went to 100 million users, or it went to 1 million users, I believe, in 5 days. Whereas it took TikTok a few weeks, it took Netflix a few months. In 5 days, they had 1 million users, and now you have over 100 million users using this on a weekly basis. This ability to talk to something and to get the answers out of it and build solutions. And so there's two things I think I want to hit on here, which is the dangers from a cybersecurity point of view. And then I also want to talk about the dangers from a leadership and development point of view.
Very good.
From a cybersecurity point of view, there's actually several things, but social engineering is now so much easier because I can deploy agents, AI, that sounds like a human and that is getting better at replicating how humans communicate. Not only that, but if you go on your if you go download the ChatGPT app right now, and if you have a pro version, you can have it talk with you. And it sounds like a human. In fact, there's a former mentor of mine, Jim Mushan, who I think might be paying attention to how I'm presenting right now, because he was the presentation skills master, used to teach how to remove ums from your communication so you came across really professional. The AI is now putting ums back into its voice to sound more human. And so I point out, how scary is that you could literally be talking with an AI bot that could be getting information from you, can replicate your voice based on models, and has a memory so it is learning. And I won't go down the entire Elon Musk sentient Terminator, right, sort of idea when it comes to all this AI, but there's a lot there we can dissect, and we can talk a lot more about that. We're scratching the surface. From a leadership and development point of view, one of the things we have to watch is the bias. This is built on information from the internet, and it's built on information we give it. I want you to imagine a child that has the entire world's information at its fingertips, but no context, right? And when we interact with generative AI, and by the way, we might say that's co-generative AI because I have to do something in order for it to generate. It's taking the same biases, the same thoughts that we had, and it's applying them and using that to create its mental models. What does that mean? If you are asking it to create an image, for instance, of a workplace, which it can do, it might create an image of a workplace as it thinks it's created based on the information it has. And if all that information, for instance, is Western centric, it's going to create a Western centric office space, right?
Right.
And so both of these issues start to overlap, but there's a lot of things we have to keep in mind as we begin interacting with these tools. And we can talk a lot more about that. Happy to dive in more. I also want to talk about some of the benefits, but Gregory, I know you are trying to keep it fair and make sure we go around to everyone. So I'll let you.
Yeah.
I'm not an AI. I'm here. I'm really talking. I'll say so you know.
That's
there
good.
you go,
Yeah,
Gregory.
yeah. Well, one follow up. At this stage in my life, I have seen where AI can help me crunch numbers and can help give me data, but I'm not sure I want it to make decisions for me. What are your thoughts, just shortly, quickly on that?
Well, you are hitting on a very a topic of philosophy, I believe,
Yes.
right? When I worked in autonomous vehicles, and if you are in a philosophy class, you've heard of this, the trolley problem, which is if I have an autonomous vehicle, for instance, it is thinking on its own, and it comes to a position where it has to go left or go right, and either way has a bad outcome. For instance, it runs over this person over there or that person over there. How does it decide?
Mm-hmm.
That's very scary. I mean, that's something, by the way, they are trying to think through, and I don't think there's a good answer. I'll put it that way.
Right.
Now, how do we make sure that we might not want it to make decisions for us. What we need to do is allow it to use it in a way to help us make decisions.
Okay. Very good. Yeah.
It's not going to take over. A lot of people think it's going to take over your job. AI won't take over your job, at least not right now. Someone who's using AI effectively is going to, right? And that's why we need to get on it, and you need to figure out how it helps you make better decisions, less biased decisions, more diverse decisions.
Okay. Very good. Cy, what do you think is the impact of AI on cybersecurity?
Well, Josh raised some really great points about how AI, and in particular generative AI, is really transforming our lives. And it's here, it'll be there into the future and truly transform. But we've got to understand how to use it. And one of the things we have to understand is that the bad guys are starting to use AI also. So one point that Josh made was social engineering. Well, let me share some statistics and take a deeper dive into this. That'll really hit home. According to Verizon's DBIR, Data Breach Investigations Report, which is a credible report every year, they look at thousands of cybersecurity incidents, try to figure out what happened, why it happened. 74% of the reason why data breaches happen is because of human error.
Right.
74%, nearly three-quarters.
Right.
And so, that is the weak link, is the human. And so now imagine with AI, not only what Josh mentioned about the voice, but what about those spear phishing emails, which are frequently the cause for people inadvertently clicking on a link they shouldn't be, or downloading something that they shouldn't. Now imagine those emails being so much more powerfully tailored and customized for the human, that it appears so good that I am going to definitely click, or I'm going to download. There's no more typos. There's no more, bad English, incorrect English that might give us an alert that, it's coming from East Europe, guy doesn't even know how to, write proper English. That's a red flag. No, those are gone. It's got the logos. It's got the right URLs. It looks like it's somebody that who communicates the way they communicate with you. All those things. So that's one simple example of generative AI being used by the bad guys. So we have to be aware of that and battle that on our side as defenders. And so we've got to start to look at ways to use AI to look for those kinds of emails, to go beyond that and start to get to the human, and make sure that our human firewall is as strong as it can be, along with, of course, the technical controls in the organization. So that's one piece that we have to be really paying attention to, is that the human is still the weakest link, and we've got to look at AI as a way to use it for our own benefit. And frankly, cybersecurity is like playing chess, if you think about it. I don't know how many of us play chess or in the audience, but simply, if we make a move, in chess, we're just going to lose. But if we, before we make the move, we think of what that move possibly will result in from the opponent making a move, and then what move will I have, and what will the opponent move? In other words, anticipating, thinking 2-3 moves ahead, then you're going to win the game. But if you just move without really thinking through, you're going to lose because you're going to be shocked and surprised what the opponent does. So same thing with cybersecurity. So what we've got to do is we've got to attack this, which is 74% of the root cause is humans, and really improve and enhance and strengthen the human firewall. And we'll talk more about it, but CyberCatch partnered with ELB Learning to introduce HackOps. It's next generation cybersecurity training for the entire organization, especially those in the public sector who are a high value target. And what we've done is we've created this game that's a combination of a Hollywood movie and a game. So there's real actors, and we actually have the student, the learner, role play a new hacker being trained by the GOAT, the dark web GOAT. And the student actually is there to infiltrate. So it's fun, but you really start to think and behave like an attacker. And that's how you get 2 steps ahead. So we'll talk more about that, but that's the way we got to be paying attention. The AI is here. We've got to use it for our own benefit. And we've got to do creative things like the game, for example.
For sure. Now, Paul, we've been talking about the influence of AI on just about everything in our society. From one of the things that Cy brought up was like playing chess. You anticipate moves. Is that not the role of a leader within an organization?
Absolutely. And one of the most difficult things for leaders is actually around decision making. And so some areas that I've seen leadership development really work is enhancing that decision-making ability. And that's where AI can definitely be helping with that. I mean, there are multiple ways that you can do that. I'm going to go back about 10 or so years when we did video branched learning, but you could do that with AI now, where it was in a restaurant setting and you could go up to a table and you see a disgruntled guest. Well, you could do a situation where you're going up and you're talking with that person, and that AI response is going to be what is a valid response someone might give based on the input that you're giving. I'm doing a Duolingo to improve my French and to learn Spanish, and there are conversations that I will have with the system, the app itself, and they throw out a topic and they say something and I'm typing my response, and they're saying something and I'm typing my response, and it's a whole conversation going. So as a leader, you may do that around having a difficult conversation with someone on your team where you need to confront something. Could be a cyber breach that they did and you need to have that conversation, or something else. And if you can use AI in that way to do some of these things on how are you going to respond in a way that is going to get you the best result that you're wanting. So those are some things that I've done in the past, but I think with the new technology and formats coming out now, that would be very helpful. I will say that a lot of leaders are either confused by AI or they're afraid of AI.
Mm-hmm.
And so a big part of leadership development could also be just getting past that initial bias against, I don't want to go down that road. I just want to keep doing what's worked for me in the past. But as Josh said, we're not going to be able to do that.
No.
Our society is moving forward and we have to stay in touch with it.
Well, it seems like one of the challenges for a good leader is to anticipate the changes that are occurring and then try and implement, at least be aware of it, and then try and implement leadership decisions that are mindful of that impact.
And that's where predictive analytics comes in. A lot of things that we have used in previous organizations where I've worked is what is the data telling us now, but what is the predictive aspect of that? And then tapping in with AI as well to say, okay, what would proper responses be, or what is a good strategy based on this information that I'm getting, and that's what you're putting in. Give me some things that I need to be aware of, including some emerging trends that are going on in whatever your specific area of the public sector.
Very good. Very good. Cy, do you have any particular comments about what's been said so far?
No, I think these are terrific perspectives that are complementary and build on us, becoming more, sensitive and forward thinking as leaders. And it's really realizing that we're in a next generation type mode here with AI, digital, and working from home. It's a new world, and so we've got to think ahead and anticipate and take our organization forward. So a couple of things that I just want to build on that, is if you think about success and leadership, it boils down to really people, and whether they're in the office, whether they're remote, whether they're behind a computer, whether they're front facing, whether they're coding, it's people. Even AI, AI is still created by people, and AI will be managed by people. I mean, AI cannot just operate by itself. It'll die eventually, if it doesn't get fed and doesn't get nurtured, doesn't get trained, right? I mean, how does AI work? You have to train the model. I mean, who does that? A human being does that. So we have to recognize that. That's fundamental, number one. And number two, we've got to also think about, the risks that we face, and so with people, what our, panel has said is, we've got to focus on the people. That's really key. And so if you look at cybersecurity, and I'll share a quick, case shortly here, quickly, because this will illuminate, and I think this will be new information for the audience. It's not widely known, so I'll share this. So a couple of years ago, if you remember, Colonial Pipeline happened, and some of us may remember it, a little bit more than others. But it's one of the largest pipeline operators in the world, and certainly at top of mind here in the United States. They move gasoline and petrol and oil to key places so that we can function as an economy. A couple of years ago, they had a ransomware attack, and the President of the United States declared it a national emergency, and the pipeline was shut. And it was causing tremendous harm to the economy. Planes couldn't land, gas fuel prices spiked up. People thought, oh my God, is this going to be again like Iran-Contra days, where we can't get gas, all that. It was a panic situation. Why? Because Colonial Pipeline got a ransomware attack and they shut down the pipeline. But here's the deal. The ransomware did not go into the pipeline. The ransomware did not affect the operational technology. Most people don't know this. Here's what happened. The attackers, which is a criminal gang, identified one user in Colonial Pipeline, one user who had a virtual private network. He was a remote worker, talking about work from home, VPN access, and he had credentials, but he hadn't used his credentials for a while, depending on his job. And so it's dormant. But the attacker found the dormant VPN account, and they then did some social engineering, reconnaissance, found out what his role was, where he worked before, went to the dark web, and figure out what his credentials were, his password. And then they used that to get into Colonial Pipeline, his credential. So his credential was easy to be guessed. Now, did you know there's over 23 million people in the world that use the password 123456? 23 million people. I mean, bad hygiene. So now imagine this guy working for another company where that was breached, and he's still using that same password here at Colonial Pipeline. He just created a risk for the company that nobody even knows about, right? Attacker finds it, gets it, uses it, and gets in. And then they traversed into the accounting system and put the ransomware there. That's it. That's all they needed to do. And so it got shut down as far as the billing and accounting. The CEO said, whoa, we don't know how deep it is. Let's shut it down. Let's pay the ransom, get the keys back. That's what happened. Okay. Right. So again, back to a human. They also didn't have multi-factor authentication. So that's, again, a poor control. That's one of the controls I talked about, 108, 110, right? So, but it goes back to, again, people. So we've got to be cognizant of that as we move forward.
Right. So if I'm a government employee and I'm VPN in, I suspect, into the agency's network, what have you seen? Any changes, any controls that the agency should consider, if not have, to protect that flow of data from point A to point B?
Yeah, no, absolutely great question. So certainly, the way I look at it is, again, goes back to the people and leadership. So leaders have to do certain things to lead Organization has to do certain things to lead, but the employee has to do certain things to also do their part. So, as a work from home employee, what one should do is, number one, realize that the initial attack actually could come into the home.
Yes.
So take a look at your home. Do you have, IoTs? Alexa is an IoT. Your smart TV is an IoT. Maybe you have a smart refrigerator. Maybe you have a smart coffee maker. Make coffee, you tell the coffee maker. It makes coffee. Tell me if I need beer. The refrigerator will tell you if you need beer, right? So baby monitors. Security cameras. We probably have a lot of IoT in our home. So we got to be cognizant of that, number one. Number two, we've got to look at our home router and go, is everything being routed through this one router? Or have I segmented that? So one thing we can do is we got to make sure that a home router doesn't have the password that came from the factory or from the provider. So I've got to change that password, number one. Otherwise, it's so easy for the attacker to crack that in 1 second. The other part is I need to segment that my home router to make sure not everything is in one segment. So my work access should be in a different segment. My work PC or laptop, MacBook should be in a different segment, and then my IoT should be in a different segment. So that way, if the attacker gets in, they cannot easily just traverse. So that's one thing we can do as an employee. The other thing, of course, is not to make sure that we don't use dumb passwords like I just said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But I use password managers, for example, and not reuse a password that I've used at another organizations, because that could be breached. I might not be aware of, and then the attacker has it on the dark web. So those are the things. The employer has to have multi-factor authentication, absolutely turned on for every single employee, not just privileged users. So that's just a basic blocking and tackling control that we frequently find missing. So MFA has got to be in there because at least it blocks the attacker. The attacker makes it more difficult for the attacker. So that's one thing fundamental. The other thing is essentially monitoring, access. Who's accessing it? When are they accessing through the VPN? Monitoring the dormant VPN accounts, the example I gave, Colonial Pipeline. So there's certain things that the employer can do on the back end. If somebody's logging in all of a sudden and it looks like an IP address that's in Eastern Europe, that's a red flag. When our employees are nowhere near there, those kinds of things that you've got to look at, how long are they in, where are they traversing in the network, what are they downloading? Those kinds of, signals would be indicators of possible an attacker that you can try to shut it down.
Do you think federal agencies, the leadership in federal agencies, are doing what you just discussed, especially with the remote worker end of the data?
No, unfortunately. I think, they think that it's under control, that it's somebody else's job, and somebody is doing to do this. So I think what I would say to the leaders is, no, please ask some questions and say, hey, what are we doing from a cybersecurity point of view? Are we in compliance with NIST 80171, or CMMC or NIST CSF? And what kind of monitoring are we doing? Do we have MFA turned on? Just some basic questions as leaders can start asking within their groups, and then that'll start to percolate into other groups, and all of a sudden light bulbs will go on and you can start to find some gaps and weaknesses. But it's got to be a team effort. That's the key thing here. Right. Very good. The other thing, Gregory, I would say, if I may just quickly, is the training is really key. So we've got a game called Hack Ops I mentioned. The audience members should reach out to ELB. It's really cool because we spent almost a year developing it. So it's not easy to do because the training today doesn't work. The training is ineffective because 3/4 you can see are causing these errors. So what we did was we looked at all these cases like SolarWinds, Accellion, all these big cases, and we figured out how the attacks happened and what could have been prevented it. And so we took all that knowledge and put it into this game and made it fun. So its next generation is 3-dimensional virtual reality. You role play in 60 minutes and you come out of it going, oh, wow, I had no idea. This is how attackers think and behave. So the human becomes very strong, whether you're in the server room or in the mail room or in the boardroom, or in the office. It's for everybody. And so that's what we got to do. We got to, think like the attacker so that we can be 2 steps ahead. Right. Now, Paul, from leadership development training point of view, how does all of this kind of fit in? I mean, because obviously there's some new techniques that have to be deployed, especially with young people. I mean, I've worked with graduate students and undergraduate students all the time, and none of them I would want to take out on a sales call, if you know what I mean. So
what kind of training do you think is needed or methods of helping people learn? And obviously, Cy has brought up a pretty good plan with the gaming type of approach. What are your thoughts there?
Definitely, I would say what Cy was talking about really should be part of the annual compliance training for all leaders. And we actually would put it in for all teammates. So we would have in a public hospital setting, we would have an annual compliance training that would hit on a lot of patient safety things and so forth, but we would have things related to cybersecurity, other IT issues, and that was required for all employees. So that's something that definitely should be part of that. Other things that you can do on some of the topics that you mentioned would be more of a discovery learning or more of an immersive learning, where a lot of times training focuses on head knowledge. Well, the only benefit of that is the person feels a little smarter. If the head knowledge is not going to change the behavior, then there are other things those people could probably be doing in most cases. So having discovery learning where they're actually going through scenarios like what Josh and Cy have talked about, or they're having problems that they're having to solve. And from that, then they're building out their principles on how they're going to lead or how they're going to work through their day. Versus typically they start with, okay, here are 10 principles that you're going to do. And now we're going to go in depth into those. That's good. But a way that you can learn another way is to get into some actual role playing. So you're getting right into activities, and that can be done in a face-to-face setting, but I've also seen where it's done online and in a virtual setting. And that's where ELB is very strong in that whole aspect of whichever works best for the organization. Also having certain, especially if you're dealing with leadership development, doing things in a cohort group. So then, and cross-functionally. So we'd have HR, finance, IT, operations, whatever other areas, and they're going through the different experiences in a cohort. It builds that cross-functional mentality, but then also it allows you to see who your leaders are that you might tap on the shoulder during a talent review or succession planning and say, you know what, you've been great in this area. I'd love to move you over, at least temporarily, to another area to get a breadth of experience. And then that could prepare that person for moving up in the organization, or they get a wealth of experience under operations and they bring it back into finance or IT or HR. So that talent mobility is really important as part of stretch assignments and so forth. The last thing I just mentioned is around coaching. So if you have top talent you're really trying to keep, we often think of coaching as a negative, punitive thing. Coaching is actually done, if done correctly, is a very positive development item. So we've had top talent that we want to get ready for the next level. We've assigned coaches to them to help understand what any derailers are and to really work through that. You can also do that virtually in an AI setting with a coaching AI tool that could be developed as well as having an actual live coach.
Very good. Very good. Well, I think it's time to maybe look at some of the questions that have come up in chat. Stephanie, are you, can you see what those are and present?
All right. So if you have any questions for our presenters, and it can be a question specific to Paul, specific to Josh, Cy, or just a general question for anyone, go ahead and put those in the chat right now. We'll give everyone a minute or so to put those in if they have any questions.
While we're waiting, Gregory, I could say, you know, I've never met a public sector organization or employee who wasn't budget constrained.
Sure.
And as a result, I think there's a few things that have come up in all these. One is an AI can run a simulation for you. And what I mean by that is if you have a leadership guide or a leadership training, or you have perhaps a security policy, now removing all the information that you might not want to get, you can put that in the AI and ask the AI to take on the role of 20 different potential actors, whether that's a new employee, a bad actor overseas, and go through and audit all of that for you. and provide you immediate feedback.
Yeah.
And so in some ways that can be used as a low tech, even though it's a high tech solution, you do it by talking to it, right?
Right.
That can be an easy way for someone to go in and say, how actually would this come across? Because, for instance, you said something that reminded me. You said there's some undergrads and graduates you wouldn't want to take on a sales call. And I was thinking that depends on who you're selling to,
Well,
right?
That's true.
And so what I could do is I could say, hey, I want you to take this and I want you to do it as though they are an undergrad, as though they are a graduate, as though they are someone who is from, Generation X, the great generation, whatever you want to say. And now in instant time, I can run through a million scenarios, literally, and get the feedback and integrate that feedback. And so my delta, right, between perhaps how open my security flaws are, where my L&D issues are, can be shorter, and it gives you more area to focus. The
Right.
other thing that's interesting is I would start thinking about first principles. We need to train people, and with AI that can listen, that can adapt, that can do things in the moment, where do I not need to train or provide learning, but can provide in the moment support? Imagine that I'm a leader and I'm having a problem with a person right now. I can role play. Think about how much more powerful it is if I could get information about the employees, put that in an AI, and role play with an AI that's taking on the role of the employee. Think of how much more powerful that could be if I am in a conversation right now, and there are tools like this, especially for sales, where as I'm talking, it's listening and saying, hey, you're using a lot of lingo. You're using a lot of these sort of things. It sounds like this person is this, try adjusting.
Right.
And so if we think about first principles, what is the goal of training might start to change in where you focus that training, which allows you to use your budget a lot more effectively and start to use some more cost-effective solutions, which I've, again, never seen a public sector organization or a government organization that couldn't use some of that money back. All the security concerns that I know are running through Cy's head aside. So I just wanted to mention that for a second.
Well, thank you. Cy, I when I hear of companies that have been hacked, I don't feel sorry for them, to be honest with you. Is that an appropriate thing to say? Or because, I mean, they know, hopefully somebody in that company knows that they have to, that what the requirements are, especially if they're dealing with Department of Defense and so on. So what are kind of your thoughts? I mean, do you give them, you cut them slack, or you say, hey, you guys, you should have done this, or that?
Yeah, no, unfortunately, it's really lack of, true understanding that, we are digital, as I mentioned at the beginning, and we're in a different world. And so, again, a lot of leaders are not thinking of themselves as a digital organization. And frankly, every single leader should think of themselves as a digital organization, whether you're in the public sector or private sector, because we are digital. So that's one key point. So once you think of it that way, and then you start to think about how that manifests itself into your business or operations, that you've got to manage your operations. So what do you have? You have people risk. We talked about that. You have operational risk, and then you have cyber risk. So it's a mind shift, paradigm shift that we have to get there. And then people have to realize that, the attackers can get in very, very easily because you're digital from thousands of miles away. And with AI, like Josh was saying, it's so much easier now. So once you understand that and have that mind shift, then you go, okay, it's fundamental for me to be able to have this mitigated. And so I've got to put in the proper defense. I've got to think of it smartly. Because it's critical to me. It's just like, not being able to have sales. Like, you got to have sales, you got to have customer service, otherwise you'd be out of operations. So it's similarly fundamental, which is that you've got to think of yourself as digital and put in the proper defense, and then know that, there's a guideline out there. There's a roadmap, and NIST 80171, again, I go back, is what everybody should really take a close look at. It's 110 controls. It really works. If you implement them, it's rock solid. And that's why the U.S. military is saying, DoD organizations should use it, but I think everyone should really implement those controls.
Without a doubt. All right, guys, we're coming to pretty much the end of our webinar. Are there any final thoughts that Paul, Josh, Cy, you guys would want to make?
I would just say leaders need to empower their frontline teammates. So in hospital settings, we have something called the CUS method. And if someone's in an operating room, for example, and it could be the person who had just cleaned the operating room and they see something that is not going correctly, they would say, I'm concerned, I'm uncomfortable, this is a safety issue, and we have to stop. And we
Okay.
would empower people at all levels to do that. So if you see that there's a cybersecurity issue, or there's something that's going on, frontline need to be able to stand up and say, I have a red flag, let's stop and discuss this. And leaders need to know how they can empower their frontline people to do that, because leaders can't stop everything. So we need our
That's
frontline
right.
people to do it too.
Very good.
I would say legal,
Steve,
yeah, when it comes to generative AI, especially right now, there's a lot of concern from legal departments, from security, from technical departments. And thus, some folks are saying, I'm going to wait until my organization is ready, and then I will start learning and engaging with generative AI. And I would say it's going to happen. They're going to at some point approve it and come out with a policy that allows some use of it. If you wait until then, think about how far behind you will then be.
Yeah, exactly. Cy?
Yeah, thank you, Gregory. I would just say, obviously, people should be top of mind, people risk and cyber risk. And so you've got to make sure that your people are the strongest human firewall they can be. And towards that, please do check out HackOps. It's a great option and solution.
Very good. Stephanie, I forgot. Did you see any questions for in the chat?
I think that our presenters have addressed everything.
Okay.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's always great to see all the different perspectives. I think we learned a lot today.
And I'd like to thank each of you for participating, Josh, Cy, Paul, and this in this ELB learning and WRG webinar. And I wish everybody a wonderful day ahead. And if we don't talk again, have a really good holiday. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Gregory.
Thank you, everyone. And you'll be getting the recording in your inbox. Have a great day.